Well, hello and welcome. We are about to do a live taping of our 4 and 3 podcast. Andros here, Goins-Phillips there. And yeah, we are about to hit record. If you like the podcast and you want to get news from a Christian perspective, which you're not going to get many places else, feel free to subscribe. You can watch this podcast and listen to it on the YouTube channel. It's also on iTunes now. We will be promoting that a little more here in the coming days. But you can find it on iTunes. We are there, and I guess all your other favorite places that you check out podcasts. So we break down 4 of the top stories of the day, and we tackle 3 angles about them and talk about them from a Christian perspective as well. Stories we think are important to you, oftentimes that mainstream media is just not covering. So thanks for being here, and yeah, we're going to fire up this taping here in just a sec.
Faithwire.com.
Hello and welcome to 4 and 3, a podcast breaking down 4 of the most important stories of the day and 3 things you need to know about them, all from a Christian perspective. Today's Friday, May 21st, 2021. I'm Dan Andros. Coming up on the podcast today, a huge legal win for a California church that was punished by Gavin Newsom's COVID orders. And a Marvel movie director is apologizing for whitewashing a character who was allegedly supposed to be Asian. Tim Tebow signs a 1-year deal with the Jaguars in the NFL, and the haters are out in force because of that. We'll have the details there. And more than 700 sexual exploitation survivors are calling on Congress to investigate Pornhub. We've been covering that story for some time now, and that is the latest update. We'll have that and more with Goins-Phillips from Faithwire.com. Trey, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. I'm feeling kind of nostalgic now that we're going back into making fun of Tim Tebow for being a Christian. It feels like the old days.
It does. And look, this website launched about 4.5, almost 5 years ago now. And I remember Tebow was transitioning into baseball at that point. It's crazy to think that it's been that long, and he just keeps staying in it somehow. He's in the spotlight always somehow, and it's amazing you could be this controversial for just being a nice guy, right? I mean, he's just a good guy.
Exactly.
I mean, he's a faithful guy. I have not seen him really do anything really out of line that I can think of, other than dare to pray in public. And he gets this much hate. It's unbelievable. But this is just the latest in that. So, all right, why don't we dive right in here? Story number 1, and this is a huge legal win for a church in California. They're going to have to pay over $1 million in legal fees and attorney costs as part of a settlement reached with Harvest Rock Church over litigation surrounding the state's lockdown rules. Last year, Harvest Rock and other ministries sued Governor Gavin Newsom over COVID pandemic lockdown orders, limiting the size and scope of worship gatherings. And at the time, they argued that this violated religious freedom, and the state's going to have to pay a total of $1.35 million. It also prohibited the unfair treatment of houses of worship in emergency orders, explaining that the state government could, quote, impose capacity or numerical restrictions on religious worship services and gatherings at places of worship that are either identical to or at least favorable as the restrictions imposed on other similar gatherings of similar risk. This order doesn't prohibit the state from issuing recommendations, it went on to say. So what's the left saying about this? Well, the left has been eerily silent, Trey, on this decision, and the media has been largely silent. This is one of those stories, like I mentioned before we started taping here. It's almost as if no one wants you to notice that this happened. So what's the right saying? Well, Liberty Council Chairman Matt Staver, whose legal nonprofit represented Harvest Rock, said in a statement that Newsom has now been permanently quarantined and may not violate the First Amendment rights of churches and places of worship again. So why does it matter? Well, it matters because, I mean, churches were clearly, if we're being honest here, churches were clearly targeted excessively and disproportionately compared to other operations and businesses and groups during the COVID pandemic. I mean, early on, it was somehow worship gatherings were like ground zero of possible super spreader events. I mean, I remember seeing videos, we covered them, Trey, like in Mississippi, there was just like 20 police cars showing up at a church service where people were even at times were in their cars listening to the service, trying to be safe that way, but still gather for worship, and police still showed up. So we saw lots of stories like that. We covered one, Trey, if you remember, that even in California, they had banned singing online. Like the band couldn't get together online and then stream it out and sing. That was the insanity that was going on. Yet at the same time, you'd have hordes of people lining up at Walmart and Target, and that was completely fine. So this is a big win for people of faith, and hopefully it will set a standard that in the future, as governments won't be as easily able to put these churches in such a difficult position where they're basically faced with getting a fine or possibly even arrested just to show up for church.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the criticism I think is fair because so many people have just looked and said, "What's with this hypocrisy?" Right? Like there were so many people, like different stores, like you mentioned, that were wide open for the most part for people to go in. Obviously, they had mask restrictions and that stuff, but people could go anywhere they wanted to for that. And then over last spring and summer, with all of the protests for Black Lives Matter, and then even later all the rioting, it's like all of this is okay, and like not even like. I remember there were even some studies that said that this was actually the protests were actually good for the pandemic. Like
Right.
it was making us better, and it was helping to heal us. It's like and no cases were linked to any of the protests. Like how do you know that? How can you possibly say that?
The virus had this uncanny ability to know when and when not to spread. It was just hey, if it was at a left-leaning protest, a Black Lives Matter protest, it was totally fine. If you were celebrating Joe Biden's victory, totally fine. The virus knew to just lay back and chill then because it's a righteous and virtue signaling virus, I guess. That seemed to be what they were saying. It was just they were picking and choosing when it was cool to, push the limits on a gathering. So, yeah.
And I think that's the problem that should bother everybody, regardless of your religious beliefs. If you're a Christian or not, that the government was kind of deeming what was socially acceptable and what was morally okay, right?
Yeah.
Like it was morally and ethically okay to come together in mass for these Black Lives Matter protests, but to get together to worship. Come on, you can just watch that on Facebook Live. Don't be irresponsible and try to be together with other believers.
And they sent police in many places. Fine. I mean, it was just insane. I mean, and look, praise God that we're not in Canada right now because we're seeing what they're doing.
Sure.
Still throwing pastors in jail. And, I saw the latest update on pastor, the Polish pastor up there who chased away Artur Pawlowski, I believe is his name. And someone set his house on fire over the weekend. I mean, it's just insanity. And that's a division that this kind of stuff has caused.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking at Canada over this last year, Dan, has just been like,
it's crazy.
Wow, it is otherworldly over there compared to what we're going through. And I thought what we're dealing with was bad.
Yeah.
So scary stuff going on for sure.
Indeed.
All right, story number 2. So Kevin Feige, he's the president of Marvel Studios. He said in an interview published this week that he was wrong to cast a white woman for a character depicted as an Asian man in the comic book series for Doctor Strange. So in 2016, Feige defended the decision to cast Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One because he was trying to avoid negative stereotypes of a cliche, old, wise Asian man. That was what he said at the time. And also, Marvel Studios defended the casting then, saying that the title of the Asian One was not tied to a particular ethnicity or nationality, but was instead, quote, a moniker passed down through time, and in this particular film, the embodiment is Celtic. The company said it was very proud to have the enormously talented Tilda Swinton portray the character. Now, though, Feige's saying he was wrong to cast her for the role because of the color of her skin. We thought we were being so smart and so cutting edge, he said, but now he believes the MCU should have found a way to avoid the stereotypes about Asian men and still cast an Asian character. Feige's admission comes as MCU is gearing up in September to release its newest movie, Shang-Chi, and The Legend of the Ten Rings, whose title character is based on an Asian comic book superhero. So, what's the left saying about this? Well, they haven't weighed in on this MCU movie in particular, but there's been plenty of pushback from the left on limiting who can play certain roles based on the color of their skin or their sexual identity. So, for example, Elton John had to come to actor Taron Egerton's defense when he is a straight man, was cast to play the iconic singer, who is, of course, gay. He said that it was BS, essentially, that people were angry that somebody else that a straight man was playing Elton John. So Scarlett Johansson also faced backlash in 2017 from the left for agreeing to her role in Ghost in a Shell, which is a movie based on a story set in Japan and authored by a Japanese author. So last year, the producers of The Simpsons franchise announced, after pushback from the left, that they would no longer allow white actors to voice any minority characters. And there's also been debate over the years over whether non-transgender people should be allowed to portray transgender people on TV shows and in movies. So that's just a little bit of what the left has been saying over the years. And what's the right saying? Well, conservatives have not really been vocal on this issue because generally they just reject Hollywood altogether.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the reaction from the right. So why does this matter? I think it matters because we should be sensitive to accurately portray different experiences and to highlight different kinds of voices, of course. But the thing that we should always remember is that, one, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
And that should be our priority, regardless of where you come from, what color your skin is, what your orientation is, all that stuff. But number two, Dan, I think the most obvious issue I have with all of this is that these people are actors. It is literally their job to portray something that they are not.
It's the definition of an actor, is to bring a character to light that you're not. I mean, it's utterly insane that that's even a standard. I mean, you're going to put so many people out of work. I mean, and think about this. What does the reverse apply? So if you're an Asian actor, can you not then play a white actor, or like a white, someone who was like a white, or some other ethnicity? Then you limit the roles of minorities because they can only play roles that match their ethnicity. And so since obviously the majority of people are of a certain type, you're going to naturally, just by statistics, limit the roles that they can play, unless you break your own rules and allow them to play different things. I mean, it's a ridiculous standard. And I mean, this is what happens when you go to the woke route. It's just, you end up following absurdity. And, hopefully it's not too late before people realize this, because there's just so many rules that, you can't, when you try not to offend anyone, there's so many rules. I don't see how you could possibly follow them all.
Well, and I think too, with the movies that have characters who fall into the LGBT community, what's bizarre to me is this push that only people who are also LGBT should be playing those characters. And I think there's the LGBT community, for as much attention as it gets, is a really small subset of society. Yeah. And like you said, to limit those roles to only people in those communities, I mean, we're going to have 5 actors who are going to play these characters? I mean, it's just...
And the disproportion, I mean, we've got Pride Month coming up, and every company's going to change to a rainbow, so brace yourself for that. But I always say that if you were an alien from another planet and you just came down here and you knew nothing about the human race and you just watched TV to learn about it, you would think that 80% of the population is LGBT. Like, you just would think you would think it. There's just no way you wouldn't. It's just... That's the way it's being celebrated. It's pushed on every show. Like, you would get that sense, I think, for sure. But that's just my theory. If aliens exist, which it seems, by the way, this is unrelated, Trey. It seems, by the way, we're going down that road. I mean, we have to cover the UFOs on a future podcast here.
I know we do need to talk about the UFOs. I mean, because we mess up so much stuff on our own planet. I just can't imagine. Do we really want to open the door to other universes?
No, we don't want to bring wokeness to the galaxy.
We need to figure it out here before we export it anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna hear it like, oh man, no no Gungans can play these other roles. I mean, it's just gonna be madness. It's gonna be madness. So.
Yeah.
All right, let's head into story number 3 here. And this one is Tim Tebow back in the spotlight again. And the haters are out in force. So he signed a 1-year deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars, which put him on the 90-man roster and gave him a chance to make the team. And he could still be cut and not suit up for the Jags this year. But right now, he's got that chance. So the Jaguars also selected Clemson star Trevor Lawrence with the number 1 pick in the draft. And they have also Tim Tebow's former college coach, Urban Meyer, who's now the coach of the Jaguars. So there's a lot of excitement in Jaguar land there in northern Florida for this upcoming season. Even though Tebow hasn't played a snap in the NFL for 9 years, and he's been out of the league for over 6. As we talked about before the podcast here, he spent 5 years in the minor leagues, trying to make a major league roster. Ultimately didn't make it to the big show. So what's the left saying? Well, not everyone is excited about Tebow getting a shot here, Trey. Immediately, critics pointed to Colin Kaepernick and wondered how come Kaepernick didn't get a shot, and they said it was racism because Tebow's white and Kaepernick is not. And obviously Kaepernick is famous for the whole kneeling for the anthem thing. Stephen A. Smith, a prominent sports commentator, called the signing white privilege. And an op-ed today in The Guardian calls Tebow's signing a, quote, farce in what really read as an anger-filled adult temper tantrum. That's what it sounded like. Let me give you a taste of it. It said, you can be forgiven for forgetting all about Tim Tebow unless you really care about God, Florida, minor league baseball, or mundane football analysis. But Tebow time is back, people, and it's not going away anytime soon. The whole situation is hilarious and stupid and utterly compelling. And I don't think he means compelling in a positive way. So what's the right saying? Well, plenty of folks have stepped up in Tebow's defense, not just political left and right. You have former NFL player Brandon Spike says people need to stop, quote, pulling race expletive about the Jags signing him. Former NFL wide receiver Jimmy Smith, who played for the Jaguars, defended the signing, saying they need a guy like him on the team as opposed to someone like Kaepernick. We need a guy like Tebow. He said he's a hometown hero who has a love for the city anyway. And he said Kaepernick would just divide the locker room. So why does it matter? Well, normally someone getting signed to the 90-man roster isn't really a noteworthy move, but Tebow is one of the most prominent Christian figures in the country today. And I mean, he's always managed, as we talked about, to handle his notoriety in almost an impeccable fashion. It really is quite something because today you get nabbed for anything, a tweet, a comment, especially Christians. I mean, even Chick-fil-A, they got them. They always ask about your view on marriage, etc. It says in the Bible, Trey, that in Titus and elsewhere, it talks about being above and beyond reproach. And it's hard to argue, I think, with the fact that so far Tebow's been pretty close as you could possibly get to that description. And I have a feeling. This is just a hunch that we are going to be doing a lot of Tim Tebow stories and Jacksonville Jaguar stories, actually, because Trevor Lawrence, Trey, is known for his faith as well. So I have a feeling, I know you're not a big sports guy, but I do have a feeling that we're going to be hitting a bunch of those in the days to come.
Yeah, if you have like a bottle of soda and you take off the top and you just hold the top,
yeah,
you could fit everything that I know about sports into the top, not the bottle, just the top.
Yeah.
But I do know this that it is always in vogue with our secular culture and media to hate on Tim Tebow, which I don't really understand because the man has to be like the least controversial like athlete that there is. Like he says nothing but positive. Yeah, he does nothing but say positive and uplifting things, and he just is like, I don't know. It's just it's a bizarre person to hate.
Yeah, it is really bizarre, and I mean I think we know the reason. I mean that op-ed that I mentioned, you could the hate was just oozing, and they're just so mad that someone of faith is of such high character, and it just probably frustrates them that they can't criticize. Like we talked about the other day, I think a lot of unbelievers just are waiting for Christians to fall so they can say, see, hypocrites. So I guarantee there's a lot of people like that that are just cheering, just waiting for the day, saying, I knew it. I knew he was a fraud. I mean, look, we all know, like, Tebow's a sinner too. We're all sinners. So let's not, no spoiler there. I mean, we're all sinners. We all fall short. So Tebow's not perfect, but I mean, the guy's doing a good job in a big role and putting a good light on Christ, I think. I mean, everyone has to admit it. All these people that want to criticize him always have to admit that he's a upstanding person by all accounts, who's involved with all this charity work and is just kind to people. So good for him on that. And, look, it makes sense. If you're a business person in Northern Florida, Tim Tebow is a local hero for sure. And they're going to love him there. I mean, the guy will sell more jerseys, I guarantee, per team than probably most of the players in the league. So, of course, if you can get him on the team, it makes sense. And if you looked at the guy, he's in shape. Let's just say the guy has not stopped working out. So if anyone can do it, it's Tebow.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like, his career seems like an Energizer bunny. Like he was in college football. He obviously was pro for a bit, and then he went to baseball, and now he's going back into the professional football.
Yeah.
So I mean, just keep going as long as he can.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
And like you said, he certainly will be popular.
Absolutely.
All right. Story number 4. So a group of 700 survivors of sexual exploitation are calling on Congress to launch a criminal investigation into Pornhub and its elusive parent company, MindGeek. So this comes as Pornhub, the largest pornography distributor literally in the world, has been credibly accused of hosting not only videos of sexual assault and abuse, but also videos containing child pornography or child sexual abuse material. So the group wrote in their letter, MindGeek, which owns Pornhub and at least 160 other hardcore pornography websites, serves as a case study of corporate indifference regarding harm caused to women and children on its platform. It has received widespread international condemnation for facilitating and profiting from criminal acts, including sex trafficking, filmed sexual abuse of children, and non-consensually recorded and distributed pornography. Additionally, the letter went on to say, because MindGeek intentionally placed a download button on every video distributed on Pornhub until December of last year, after being exposed by the New York Times, the company has violated federal age verification and record-keeping laws that have been in place for over a decade. This is because the download button caused the direct transfer of pornography from MindGeek to servers to individuals' devices all across the world. So it wasn't until after the Times story, which included an interview with a victim of child pornography on Pornhub, that the website decided to remove millions of videos, which a lot of critics said that kind of proved that they knew what they had on their website was illegal. That they literally scrubbed millions. I think it's somewhere 10 or 11 million videos overnight were removed from the website. The decision to delete the videos, we should note, didn't come until mid-December of last year, and it was because credit card companies Visa and MasterCard started to disallow customers to use their cards on Pornhub, which executives at Pornhub said they were exceptionally disappointed by the decision from Visa and MasterCard. But it's quite sad that it took that for them to remove, like I said, literally millions of videos. So this is not a right or left issue. It's not, conservative versus liberal. This kind of abusive material should be disturbing to everyone because it impacts everybody. There's a temptation, I think, in our culture to believe that pornography is a victimless crime, right? It's not something that hurts anybody. It's a victimless decision to look at pornography, but that's just not the case. Using pornography, even legal pornography, props up an entire ecosystem that's full of sexual abuse, child exploitation, and even trafficking. I'm reading through a new book right now, Dan, called Treading Boldly Through a Pornographic World. And the authors are talking about how parents are really having to navigate a minefield with their kids because our culture is so normalized and desensitized to the idea of pornography, which is literally available everywhere. It's available on every device that we have at our fingertips all the time. So I think to combat this, or the best way to combat this, is not only educating ourselves and our loved ones about the damage pornography does to us on an individual basis and our thinking and our view of biblical sexuality, of course, as Christians, and the way we look at the opposite sex, but it also perpetuates and literally funds criminal activity. We need to make people aware of that they're not just doing something that's about them.
Yeah.
Like they're perpetuating and propping up a system that's literally abusing women, abusing men, and maybe worst of all, abusing children.
Yeah, and it just goes to show the evil that is out there. And I think one of the big concerns, Trey, that's happening um, alongside of this same phenomena here with just the awful wickedness that's online and available to people is the fact that sex work and the idea of engaging in this industry is being elevated as a positive choice and an empowering choice. You see this over and over. Like talking about, oh, sex workers have rights too, and that's a big shift in society. That this is no longer just something that is, it's debauchery and people do it, but at least it was frowned upon. Now there's this push and this move that it's okay. And as we've talked about, it's absolutely not okay. I mean, I think a year or two ago, I wrote about the Super Bowl halftime performance, if you remember that, with J-Lo, and they were like doing stripper poles and stuff, and they called it empowering. And we talked about how that, that is not, it's not empowering to reduce yourself to a physical object, especially for women, to have men just feast their eyes and their imaginations on your physical body. It's just that's abuse. I mean, it's spiritual abuse is degrading yourself, but it's being viewed as a positive today.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple times a former pornography actor who's now a Christian, and she and her husband advocate. They lead an organization called Triple X Church now, and trying to lead people away from pornography. But she also works with women who are still in the pornography industry and wanting to find a way out. And she said we've romanticized this, both the sex work industry as prostitution and also pornography. She said, but women don't choose this. And if they do, she's few women who do choose it. They end up seeing how abusive it is, and then they get trapped and they can't get out. Or they feel like they can't get out because of the shame that's associated with it, or maybe the pimp that they're working with, and they it's holding stuff over their heads. So she said it's a whole lot messier than this romanticized secular picture we've painted of it, and it's just so toxic and damaging and destructive to human beings, both the people who are consuming it and the people who are in that industry. So it's just, like you said, it's just such a toxic and dark world. We need to raise awareness about it so that people know really what they're getting into. Because it's, like I said a few times, it's not something that's victimless. It's not just hurting you in really bad ways. It's also hurting, countless other people.
Yeah. And on that note, we have created an online e-course here called Set Free Course. You can find it at setfreecourse.com. And it is designed to help people that are either struggling with, sexual addiction of some kind, or even just sexual sin of some kind. It doesn't have to be a quote unquote addiction. And it's really, the course just really puts forward God's view and how he intends us and how he made us and how he designed sex and the appropriate use and how we're supposed to approach that. And so it's a very good foundational course for anyone. Even if you're not particularly struggling with that right now, if you want to reset your view on that, and it's a great course, setfreecourse.com. Thousands of people have taken it, and we've had just great testimonies there of people's eyes being opened and turned, their lives turned in the right direction on that front. Because I mean, the stats do not lie. I mean, it's one of the most widespread issues in the church today, and these. You see the numbers on places like Pornhub, and you can understand why the Christians are not impervious to this. In fact, we're just as susceptible as anyone else. So, All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast. As always, you can subscribe on YouTube, on iTunes, the 4 and 3 podcast, or you can just watch it right here on social media, on Facebook, or wherever else you're watching. So we're glad you're here. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will be back Monday with more news from a Christian perspective. And as always, head on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com and get your latest news there. God bless you. We will see you next time. Okay, and that's a wrap. So, all right, on to the weekend, Trey. Well, not for us. We gotta keep working, but
a few more hours.
Yeah, and yeah, a few more hours. But by the way, if you happen to be watching this portion of it before we sign off, you can email us at contact@faithwire.com is the email address that we will catch. You could always, of course, leave stuff in the comments. Happy to look into any stories you guys have, and send us tips or whatever else you want to do. We're here. We're here for you. So, all right.
For sure.
That's it. God bless you guys. We'll see you. Trey, we'll see you in a minute.